Hello, I'm Anthony Weaver and welcome to part 2 of my interview with Edgar E. Willis, retired emeritus professor of communication at the University of Michigan. We're discussing his book, Civilian in an Ill-Fitting Uniform, a Memoir of World War II, which he penned at 96 years old. Part 2 of my interview picks up from a previous question in part 1. Events had happened to Edgar that were either pure luck or based on circumstance. I was looking for a couple of stories, and part 2 starts with the second story, Edgar's pure luck Navy physical. As we progressed, I asked Edgar about the captains he served under, and his best explanation, he reads from his memoir. We also finish off part 2 with, that's the way the Navy does it. Well, one of the other stories that I found really interesting, another part of pure coincidence. You go to the Navy, into the Navy, you have to pass a physical. And when you walked in to get your physical, there's a couple portions or times in there that if something didn't happen right, well, tell me what happened.
Well, this is actually the truth. When I went to have the physical, numbers of things happened to me during that physical, which I talk about in the book. But one of the things that happened was that the person who looked at your feet was not there that day, and I have about the flattest feet in the universe. And if that person had been there, I would not have passed the physical.
So
and then later on in the war, when I had to stand watches, I began to have a lot of foot trouble because of my flat feet. And the doctor said, I think you probably should have a medical discharge. And I didn't want to leave it. And that war was not over. We were still fighting in the Pacific. And I didn't want to come home because I had flat feet. So I said, is there something else that can be worked out? And they figured out I would have watches where I could sit down. And I became a communications officer overnight without any training. Basically, it was something you were trained for a year or so, and I just overnight became a communicator, as well as being what I was specifically trained for.
Oh, okay.
Which was fighter direction.
So basically,
if it just happened, if that man with the who was supposed to check your feet had been there, I would never have been in the Navy.
And in the Navy, probably to this day, you're not allowed to have flat feet to be...
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
But back then, that was definitely the rule.
Well, yeah, because you have to do a lot of standing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you describe St. Simon's Island as one of the greatest times in your life. Zilla tells you she is pregnant, you're just about to be commissioned, school is over, and you're soon off to be serving your country. What was it about St. Simon's Island that captured so many great memories for you?
Well, it happened. I was sent. I had what they call indoctrination training for 2 months, and then after a month's delay, I was sent to St. Simon's Island to become a fighter director. Now, a fighter director is an officer who is trained to use radar, which was new at that time. It was invented in 1936 in England. But it was new, and it was used to detect enemy raids, and then we were trained to use it to get a group of 4 Navy planes from a carrier to go out and intercept planes that appeared on the radio that were unidentified.
Okay.
And that was what my basic responsibility was as an officer on the battle cruiser Alaska. And the thing about St. Simon's was it turned out that I could have my family with me. So they were there. That was the thing that made it so great. They were there I was there for a month before Zella and the 2 boys came. And then she told me she was pregnant, and the third, Andrea, eventually came in the following summer. And they were with me there. And then the other thing that made it unusual is that it was really the first time I'd ever seen an ocean. St. Simon's Island is on the Atlantic Ocean. And I saw the tides come in, I'd never seen that, and then go out. It was just a new kind of experience and a very bracing experience.
There definitely comes across in the book, because I do like your imagery of, you were talking about how you went to you go out there with Zella and the kids and they go running into the water.
Right.
And it's a very, very picturesque way of the way you wrote it and looked at it.
Right.
That was a really cool story in the book. In the book, you offer a literal, as it happened, critique of the Navy, including a couple of the captains you served under. Was the tone of your criticism written so those who read and understand not only a historical reference to war and World War II, but as an illustration of how when you are in war, sometimes things don't make any sense?
Well, sometimes. Let me just read a little section from the book.
Okay.
Which describes what it was like as a civilian. When I became a naval officer, I found I had entered a strange new world governed by protocols, rituals, and practices that from my civilian point of view can be variously described as quaint, irritating, illogical, and in a few instances downright absurd. Some, of course, were profoundly pertinent. For example, before I went into training, I studied naval regulations. And one of the things I discovered was that things that are put into naval regulations are put there and are then ignored. And two of them, one of the things that happens in civilian life in the Navy is that when an admiral, somebody comes back, he comes up the deck very ceremoniously with sailors lined up on each side and so forth. And it said specifically in the naval regulations that in time of war, these kind of observances are to be dispensed with. But they weren't. And one of my good friends on the ship, he was an officer of the deck and an admiral from the Philadelphia area where our ship was being fitted, was supposed to come on board, and he didn't have any side boys. And apparently the captain of our ship was disgraced because the admiral hadn't, and yet, according to naval regulations, they weren't supposed to.
You didn't have to,
They were supposed to be disbanded, and they never were. And then another example, when the captain that I didn't like, who I thought was an out-and-out, the first captain of the Alaska, out-and-out incompetent.
What was his name?
Fischler. Peter Fischler, Captain Peter, and I don't know why he was appointed to captain, but fortunately, he was promoted to rear admiral for reasons I don't understand, because he was totally incompetent. And he made the life of the sailors and everybody else as difficult as he could for some reasons that I don't understand. Anyway, another thing it says in naval regulations is that you're not supposed to give gifts like that to officers and so forth. And they came around asking us to make donations to give the guy a platter or something. I gave him $1, which probably was far below what they hoped for. But anyway, that's an example of some of these absurdities that I ran into as a civilian.
In the book, you make a specific line. What was that specific line? You use that throughout the book, only in the Navy, or that's the way the Navy does it?
That's the way the Navy does it.
There it is.
That's the way the Navy does it. Right. Yeah.
Part 3 continues the discussion of the captains Edgar served under. Oh yeah, he names names in the video and the book. We talk about the winding path to peace. Bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and yet the USS Alaska hadn't suffered its only casualty of the war. Don't forget, Edgar has more. Check out his book and video series, How to Be Funny on Purpose, An Anatomy of Humor. And of course, you can get Civilian in an Ill-Fitting Uniform, a memoir of World War II. Go to www.edgarewillis.com. That's www.edgarewillis.com.